Hello, where are you from?
Hi, how are you? In terms like here, I'm from New York,
And
but
what's your ethnicity?
ethnicity, I'm Afghan,
And what's your religion?
Muslim.
Okay, and can you please use TikTok friendly language? What would you like to say about Israel Palestine?
Sure. So I wanted to elaborate a little more on the documentary, um, that won an
Did you,
Oscar
did
last
you,
night.
did you, hold on, let me ask you a question. Did you see it?
I did, I did,
Okay, so I'm
and
actually going, don't like give me spoiler alert because like I haven't seen it. I'm going to go see it. So don't
okay,
tell me the whole story.
okay.
But I
Uh,
know I know the whole story of Masriata. Like I know the whole story. But I want to say something. I commend you for going to go see it because a lot of people on the pro-Palestinian side probably aren't going to go see it.
no,
And
I actually
hold on,
respect.
let me just finish. I think if people care about Israel Palestine, they should watch as many movies and documentaries as they can. I watch pro-Israel documentaries, pro-Palestinian. I think everybody should watch these kinds of things on both sides. I think you should just educate yourself on all these perspectives. You may not like what you see, you may not agree with it, but you should always be open to watching it.
I agree in the sense that you should definitely get a taste from both sides and I think this documentary kind of really captured it in the sense that it was co-created by both an Israeli as well as Palestinian. And you kind of get a little bit of a feel of what each individual kind of thinks and
But
their.
the thing is, the Israeli that created it is a lefty pro-Palestinian Israeli. I would say this is a pro-Palestinian movie. I'm not even going to call it pro-Israel at all.
I
But
mean,
that, but hold on, let me just finish. But that being said, I think since I'm going to see this pro-Palestinian documentary, I think you should now go see a pro-Israel documentary.
but no, Andrea, you haven't seen the actual film, but as someone who has, it wasn't very one-sided or overall. If you see it, you can definitely kind of see from both angles and both perspectives, and I think that's important. It wasn't so direct. If I wanted to see pro Palestinians wholly directly, I would go watch Al Jazeera. If I wanted to see Israeli, I'd watch Israel news or something like that. But I'm not. I watched this documentary with an open heart and open minds, and I had heard you previously kind of talking about this, and I wanted to kind of elaborate. I didn't realize you haven't watched the film,
No,
but
I'm watching it in a couple days now, but I'm gonna watch it. And again, I don't even care for like what I hear you, and I believe you. What I'm saying is like I just really want to see it, no matter what. I'm really excited about seeing it. Like I had bought tickets, and then I canceled the tickets because I was worried because my necklaces, someone would harass me at the movie theater.
yeah.
But what I did this time was I bought tickets for my friend too, and I'm going.
Oh,
I have a lot of because I'm a victim of violence. So so I have a lot of like PTSD going on. So the thing about it is that I'm bringing a friend,
mhm.
so I feel a little, and I'm not saying the pro Palestinians are crazy like that, but people are very passionate. So I'm bringing a
I do
friend,
agree with that. As someone who lives in New York, born and raised, I've seen definitely both sides, and
right?
it's a
So
very.
I'm bringing a friend, and the place I'm going to go see it, I feel like they have good security, so I feel like I'll be okay. I just want to go see it and just nobody bother me. Like
Mm,
I just want to go see it. I really want to go. I was really upset it wasn't on streaming, and I'm
mhm.
upset that they haven't gotten a distributor here in the United States. I think this is a shame, and I
Yeah.
hope they do.
Mhm.
But I really, really um, hope nobody. I really want to just go see this movie peacefully, be able to concentrate on it, be able to understand it. It's got subtitles, so I have to read the subtitles, and I don't want any stress. I want to be able to hear the narrative because I already know the story of Masriata very well. I've heard the Palestinians speak before. I follow the Israeli on Twitter. Um, I just really just want it to be a positive experience.
Yeah. I don't know if you're interested in like observing these kinds of documentaries or films. If you do end up watching the documentary, I also suggest Encounter Point. I've been watching a few of it's not too biased. That's another one where it's both Israel and Palestine point of view.
Okay, counterpoint. What's in counterpoint?
Counterpoint. It's basically a film where it follows both Israeli and Palestinian families that each individual has lost loved ones to the conflict, but together they come together and advocate for peace. And it kind of
Where
shows.
where is it? Where I think I already watched. I feel like I watched one like that already. Maybe it was called that. I watched something like that before. Where is the counterpoint available on?
Um, I searched it up online. I watched it with one of my friends.
I think I already saw in Counterpoint. Is it about the peace? Is it about like combats for peace or something?
Yeah,
I saw. Yeah, I think I saw it
it
already.
won, it won a few different awards as well.
I think I saw it. Like literally, I literally spent time online searching. It's like an old movie, right? It's from like 10 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I literally spent time searching online for Israeli and Palestinian. I watch Israeli films. I watch pro-Palestinian films. I watch I spend a lot of time. I don't watch so much on YouTube, but I like on my Google. I pay for a lot of films. I watched Israelism, which I kind of thought had a trash argument, but I still watched it. I thought Israelism wasn't a big news flash because it was like, oh, Jews are taught to love Israel. Wow, like we didn't already know that. And then they tried to say that like if a Jew goes to the West Bank and they learn the truth, then they'll become pro-Palestinian. I thought that was funny because a lot of Jews I know have been to the West Bank, even the Palestinian areas, and they're still very much like pro-Israel. Like, so I just thought it was kind of a bad argument.
Mhm.
So I just thought the movie was kind of a flop. But a lot of people were like really intrigued by that movie, thinking, "Oh, look how Jews are taught. Like Muslims are taught to love.
I think all religions are taught to love each other, and I think
No,
we're
no, not love each other. I mean, love like the Muslims are taught to love Palestine, and like the Jews are taught to love Israel. The Christians are taught to love Israel. This is not like rocket science. No, but the whole movie, you have to watch Israelism. It's kind of interesting. I
Mhm.
think it
And then
has a good argument, but I think it's interesting. But the thing is, they go through like this whole thing where like people are like in Hebrew school learning about Israel. Like it's. I mean, it's part of our history. It's like a given that like we're going to learn about Israel. And they
yeah.
were making it like a big gotcha, like, oh, Jews are brainwashed into loving. Like, it was just bizarre how the way they presented it. It's like it's
I
part of our.
I think it all kind of depends on what you surround yourself with. And as someone who, similar to you, has grown up in New York, I've been exposed to both sides and I've seen both perspectives of things. And me coming from an Afghan background, I've seen destruction firsthand in our country. And I think everyone you speak to, even within Afghanistan, you can speak to an American, you could speak to a Pakistani, you could speak to an Afghan, and we all have different point of views, different angles. But when we all kind of come together and we all kind of see the broader viewpoint, we can kind of digest it a little more and kind of identify where each of our flaws are and kind of use that to build upon some kind of peace and some kind of like base overall. And I
I
think
was saying, all I was saying is that I just think it's strange to make it strange that people are brought up as children to love something that's very much part of their religion, their culture, and their identity. I just
I
thought it was a strange argument. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm
yeah,
saying. I'm not saying that certain people aren't shown like the whole picture because again, people are trying. It's kind of like with your grandparents. I always tell people say, "Oh, my grandparents told me this, my grandparents that told me that." I'm a parent myself, so I know your grandparents aren't going to tell you like the sins of like your forever. Like they're going to try to make your family look as good as they can.
exactly.
You want to make them look good to you, right? So for
Exactly.
people who are trying to teach you to love Israel, they're going to show you the good side, right? Because they're like your grandparents, right? So
But
that's the
now
thing. Like, hold on, let me just please let me finish. So that's the thing. Like when you want to hear the bad side, like this girl, what happened to her was she heard it at college, right? You hear it at college, or you hear it at high school, or you hear it from your friends. This is how everything happens in life,
yeah.
Like this is how life is, Like I
Yeah.
mean, you don't hear the bad stuff from, yeah.
But now as a parent, I'm sure you can understand, but as a child, you kind of want to protect their innocence, protect their purity. So you kind of everyone puts a little bit of propaganda within their child and they kind of form them and shape them in a way which aligns with their viewpoint. But me especially too, like I growing up my parents had a very particular viewpoint on the world and a very particular viewpoint on our surroundings. But as I've grown up and I've experienced it on my own and kind of traveled around the world, watched these documentaries, I've seen that some of their
I think honestly, I think if you really care about Israel, you should go visit. Because a documentary can't tell you everything. I think going to visit is really.
I don't think now is the best time if I'm being honest. As someone who has
Can I
I've
can I tell you something? I'm going to tell you what I said earlier in this live. I'm being repetitive. I when I went to Israel, it was actually I had actually planned the trip like a year in advance. It took me a year to save up, so I bought my tickets a year. The earliest you can buy a plane ticket is like a year in advance. So my date was already set. Everything was planned out. I paid for all my tours, my Airbnb. Like I couldn't change my plans. And the thing is, PIJ was boom booming Israel at that time, and Israel was boom booming Gaza. And literally, I was almost getting ready to get on the plane. They actually stopped the day before I landed. They stopped. Like that was the last day of their boom booming. So, but I thought it was going to continue, and I was actually going to stay in Tel Aviv, and they were boom booming. Like the rockets were dropping in Tel Aviv. So I was talking to somebody. I was like, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" And I was planning bomb shelter, all these things. And he said, I went to Israel during, the intifadas. He's like, there's no good time or perfect time to go to Israel. It's just like people who go to Pakistan, right? Like, I used to worry about my kids, like, oh, the tea attacks in Pakistan. But people go to Pakistan all the time. No, that's just like it's regular. Like they travel all the time. It's not a big deal. And people go to Israel. No matter what's going on in Israel, like you're safe. It's not a big deal. There's always going to be conflict there. There's no good time. There's either going to be an intifada or a war or a tea. There's always going to be something. Traveling right now to Israel during the war is perfectly safe. The war is not in Israel. Actually, right now, there's no rockets coming because
Andrea.
Hold on, let me just finish. Lebanon is not throwing rockets, and Gaza is not throwing rockets. And people, they're actually doing tours of the West Bank right now. Even though the West Bank is like filled with all kinds of chaos, they're still doing tours of the West Bank. Israeli people are still doing like Israeli tours of the West Bank, and even having Palestinian tour guides take people to the Palestinian areas of the West Bank. So, with all due respect, like it's not unsafe to go to Israel right now.
No, I'm not denying that, but so I'm studying to be a humanitarian lawyer in the future, and one thing I have noticed, it's not easy for us, a group of us, whether it be even Israelis that I know or like Muslims, Christians, Jews. It's not easy for us to go to Israel right now, Israel or Palestine.
Why? Hold on. There is no Palestine. There's the occupied Palestinian territories. Why is it hard for you to go? Why?
When we've tried, we've been denied or we've had struggling access. We do need certain credentials in order to get there from what I was told.
Why do you need anybody can go? The only reason you'd be denied is if you're related to a T organization or if there's a problem with something you've done security wise.
No,
Any ordinary people go. Muslims go all the time. Pakistanis go. People. Listen, my ex-husband is Pakistani. I got questioned to death. I'm an ex-Muslim because my ex-husband is from Pakistan, but I still went to Israel. Like, I'm sorry, but that's just excuses. You can go unless you're
Andrea, under the UN
with something shady. Like, you can go. I mean, Serene, who's Palestinian, just said she's leaving in 3 days to go there.
No, I'm an intern under the UNRWA, and from what I'm aware of, the Israel Parliament passed legislation banning from operating within Israel.
You're part of the UN?
The UNRWA, the Relief and Works Agency within. I was an intern.
You're part of UNRWA?
Yeah.
So that's different because you work for UNRWA.
I don't work for them. It was a temporary internship.
Okay, so if you don't work for UNRWA anymore,
but I'm not currently associated with that. But I guess due to previous association,
there's you don't know. Hold on, Hannah. With all due respect, I don't know if they would ban you because you don't work for them anymore. I'm not the Israeli security. I'm just saying you don't know unless you try, right? So here would be my advice to you. This would be my advice to you. This is what I would do. This is my advice to you. If I were you and I were going to Israel, and this would apply like during this war or after, because UNRWA's been banned permanently. It's not like that's going to end after the war ends. Listen, this is what I would do, because this is what happened to me. I'll tell you a story. If you take LL will put you through the ringer if you're going to go through the ringer before you get to Israel. Because let me tell you something. Because LL is literally Israel. Just call them Israel. LL literally put me through the whole shtick, the whole security nightmare before when I was in JFK. And then when I got to Ben Gurion Airport, because LL, they put all these stickers on your passport. If they already put you through the whole spiel, they literally looked at my passport and didn't ask me anything. And remember, my ex-husband, like they put me through like hell, LL. Like it was so bad. But all I'm saying to you is I would book an LL flight. That way, if they're going to deny you, they will deny you at JFK. Like they'll put you through the whole spiel at JFK, and who knows? Maybe they'll not realize that JFK will happen to Ben Gurion Airport. I can't predict the future, But I'm just saying, I feel like if you take LL, there's a greater chance that LL will catch it if they've got a problem, and then you won't even have to worry about getting on the plane. And then you just get a refund for your ticket. Do you know what I'm saying? So I
Yeah.
think LL is they're gonna do the security check for Israel, and then they're just gonna put the stickers on the passport. I could be 100% wrong about that, but that was my experience when I went to Israel.
I had attempted, a group of us had attempted, and our names, we did struggle to get past security and all
And
that.
here's another thing: you also have to apply before. She's right, Serene. Now everybody has to apply. So you did try to go to Israel. When did you try to go?
A couple months ago, back
Okay.
in November, I want to say.
So you applied online and they denied you.
I believe so.
What do you mean you believe so? You don't
Oh,
know?
no, no, I was denied. I was denied
What do you
access.
mean? You said you believe so. Now you're saying you're denied. Like, are you sure?
No, no, you said you were denied. I was denied, but it wasn't like the full, like I wasn't like permanently banned, or I wasn't like, I was denied access, but I'm not sure if it was a permanent ban, if it was temporary. I haven't tried since then.
Okay. All right. So, okay. I feel like you're kind of making up this story, but okay, we'll just take it at face value.
I'm being very serious
Because
about it.
first you're like, I didn't try, then you're like, I tried. Okay.
No, Andrea, I literally told you, I started with the preface that I did attempt it, then you started going into your whole security spiel. But I did start off with the preface that I did try, as someone who was previously associated with the UN and all that. I was having some difficulty getting in, and I had previously started with this, and um, yeah, that was my whole spiel. I haven't tried since, I want to say, November, but
So
yeah.
why do you want to go to Israel if you were part of it? Like, why do you want to go? I mean,
I'm studying to be a humanitarian lawyer, so if I can get each side and each individual of where crises are in the world, whether it be Israel, Palestine, whether it be Ukraine, Russia, whether it be Taiwan, whether it be anywhere in the world, my mission, whether it be Congo, whether it be anywhere.
you're going to Israel to interview people on
No,
crisis.
no, I'm not going to interview people. I'm going to see on my own self what is going on with my own eyes. That's what my job is.
But
I
can I
need
tell
to
you
observe
something,
the
Hannah?
surroundings. Huh?
You just said your job, but then you said you're not. Okay, let me just tell you
Andrea,
something.
I am studying to be a humanitarian lawyer. I'm
Okay,
not, I am not.
Hannah. Let me just tell you something. As someone who's been to Israel, most of the time in Israel, there's. I know you guys. I know it looks like from documentaries. There's like crisis every second of the day, but I watched this documentary by Breaking the Silence, right? Because I watch everything. I'm not pro Breaking the Silence at all. I'm sure you know who they are. And it was about Hebron, right? And if you watch this documentary, you would think every 5 seconds someone arrested, all this stuff, raids, you'd think it was complete chaos there all the time. But if you go to Hebron, I was there for 2 days, and yes, there's soldiers there. Yes, there's an occupation. Yes, there's tension. Yada yada yada. But nothing eventful happened in the entire 2 days I was there. No crisis. Nobody getting. I was in Palestinian areas. Nobody getting arrested. No raids. No tea. Like everything was fine. People were just going to work, living their lives, whatever. What I'm trying to say to you is, if you go to Israel, unless you decide to walk in the middle of like a raid in Jenin, like you're not going to see chaos. Like you're going to see, especially in the state of Israel, like you're just going to see people living their lives. I mean, unless you go look for trouble, which is probably a bad idea because you might get pew-pewed if you're like in the middle of a shootout. But I'm just saying, like, that's what happens to people sometimes. I've seen,
But
there's been stories, let me just finish. There's been stories of people shooting TikTok videos in the middle of like between the IDF and militants. But putting that aside, all I'm saying is, unless you're looking for crisis, you're not gonna like. I mean, you might go to a refugee camp and like see a refugee camp if that's what you want to go tour. But I'm just saying, you're not gonna see like chaos unless you go looking for chaos, because most of the time people are just living their lives. I mean, yes, there are people protesting at Moscow Yalta, but I also wouldn't suggest engaging in that because they could get you in trouble with the Israeli government. But I'm just saying, like, I mean, like, unless, like I said, you go looking for trouble, and protesting and all this, you're just gonna see people living ordinary lives.
look, as someone, I've visited Afghanistan myself. I've gone to Congo. I think in any situation, it's not a matter of constant fighting, and it's not a matter of constant bickering, but it's more so being in a place where there is a war type feel, or there is a kind of
But there
dysfunction.
isn't. But that's what I'm trying to tell you, Hannah. There's not a war type feeling. We get Serene up here and she can agree with me. There's not a war type feel in Israel.
No,
There's oh Hannah, Hannah,
I
Hannah,
haven't
Hannah.
been. That's what
All right,
I'm
let me
saying.
finish. I've been there. There's not a listen. Israel does not look like a war zone. Okay, not even the West Bank looks like a war zone. Okay, you're not going to Gaza because they're not going to let you in. Period. The bottom line is it's
But
like
that,
Ramallah has like beautiful buildings and like fancy hotels and like sweet shops and restaurants and people are living on their lives. It's not like it's really it's not Africa. It's
but
where it's a third world country in parts. It's a westernized, you know, flourishing country. Even the West Bank is flourishing. I mean, there are poor areas, but I'm just saying, it's not a destitute, war torn. This is not what you're going to see there.
no, look, and I understand that, and that's what kind of like my
Even
job.
the refugee camps aren't even tents. They're houses and
I
restaurants and apartment buildings.
I mean, I'm not so sure about that. We're trying to kind of see it
Hannah,
as
Hannah, Hannah. It's a fact that the refugee camps in the West Bank are not tents like they are in, I think, whatever, Jordan or Syria, wherever they are. They are literally buildings. They're literally cities.
in
The
Jordan
refugee
and
camps.
Syria or in the West Bank.
I'm talking about in the West Bank. In the West Bank, the definition of a refugee camp in Israel, even in Gaza, I mean, now everything's bombed to smithereens. But
But that's the
before that,
problem.
well, I'm explaining to you. Before that, a refugee camp was basically a city, and the only difference between that city and other cities, maybe it was like a lower income city, like a lower income city in America, was basically that the PA in the West Bank and even the H group in Gaza, they don't allow the people who live in the refugee camp to own property. So, but the people lived in houses; they didn't live in tents, and
And
they
when
have
I say that there's
restaurants and
property
malls and
left,
everything else. They have a huge mall in one of the refugee camps. So, with all due respect, it's not like what you're imagining in these like tent places. That's, I mean, yes, Masriyata is kind of a kind of some of these Bedouin villages are kind of you know kind of third worldish, but again, it's for the most part it's a very developed. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm
look,
just saying, you're not seeing.
no, I understand that. And I do believe it a little bit. It's a little bit. You're speaking from a little bit of bias.
I'm not speaking from bias. I'm telling you facts. The refugee camps are not tents in the West Bank.
Andrea, I kind of, as a part of the UN, we kind of do
But you've
associate
never been
ourselves.
there, Hannah.
I'm aware, but we
I don't
associate
care
ourselves with on the ground
Hannah.
journalists. And
Hannah, I don't care if you're part of the UN. I don't care. I don't care.
Can I just say, like, but maybe where I see, like, where Hannah's coming from as being a humanitarian lawyer in the future.
But Serene. Humanitarian lawyer or no humanitarian lawyer, that doesn't take away from the fact that the refugee camps are not tents. And I'm not.
They're not tents, but they're not the best of buildings
Exactly.
either.
I'm not denying that. I literally said it's like a low income neighborhood. I didn't say that it's like. I didn't say it's like living at the Ritz. Listen, I don't live in a best apartment either. But that being said, half the time we don't have hot water. But that being said, I literally sometimes don't have hot water here. But putting that aside, putting my problems aside, I don't live in a refugee camp, thank God. Putting that aside, I'm just saying it's not tense. All I'm saying to her is that she's comparing it to Congo, Serene. Like,
Well, of course. I mean, every situation is different, but there is a
I'm not saying the
humanitarian
Palestinians aren't struggling. I'm just saying that we're comparing Ramallah to Congo. Come on.
Afghanistan. I've been through a whole bunch of different places, Andrea.
You've never been to
I mean,
Israel.
but there's more to the West Bank than Ramallah, Andrea. I mean, Hebron.
I understand that places like Masriyata, even before it was demolished, was like horrible because they didn't have any permits and they couldn't like live in houses. But the thing about it is like is Hannah only going to see Masriyata? Like, is like all I'm saying is she's making Israel. She literally called it war torn, war zone. Serene, do you feel like you're
under warning?
Serene, do you feel like you're going to a war zone where when you're going to like Tel Aviv and remote? Like, do you feel like you're in a war zone?
I mean, there's certain times where it's escalation. Yes, you do feel it, and there's times where no, you don't
feel
feel
like
it.
you're in a war zone when you're in Tel Aviv?
I mean, I was there at times where, yes, there were things going on, where things were escalated, where it's tense, where you're constantly having to watch over your back. And then there's times like, well, no, you're chill vibes. Like everybody's
In
living.
Tel Aviv, I mean, I know sometimes rockets are
Not in
coming.
Tel Aviv itself, but like in Jerusalem and certain places, you do feel more tense things because
I
you
mean,
don't.
Jerusalem is where there's a lot of tension
But
because
Andrea,
of different things that go on. But it's still not a war zone.
I'm
It's
not
got more military presence. That doesn't make it a war zone.
I'm not
It's
referring
not.
to Tel
We're using
Aviv.
proper terminology here.
I'm
There's
not.
a lot of cops.
I don't think her goal is to go and see a war zone. I think her goal is to go and see the humanitarian crisis, whether it be the refugee camps, the checkpoints, the demolitions of homes, the way that and conditions that people are living on, such as like Masafer Yatta and other situations in the West Bank. It's not only
But
Masafer
she
Yatta
honestly,
being
Serene, she
targeted.
didn't even mention any of that. But
I
she
mean,
watched a movie on it. She watched a movie on it. Hats off to her.
I mean, I think that's where she's coming from as a humanitarian lawyer. That's what she wants to go
But
and
you
see.
know
It
what? You know
doesn't have
what,
to be.
Hannah, maybe that's why they don't like. Honestly, you've worked as part of UNRWA. You're training to be a humanitarian lawyer. That since you work part of UNRWA, may not be on Israel's side. Maybe that's why they don't want you there.
I mean, I've seen several UNRWA workers and humanitarian lawyers that have been able to go and visit. I think that maybe you didn't answer their questions properly because there is a certain level of degree of how you are to answer those questions. Like they want to know exactly where you're going to be traveling, where you're going to be staying, who you're going to be visiting, certain things. And if you don't have those direct answers, yes, they are going to deny you access to go and visit. So, like for me as a Palestinian, I'm questioned who am I going to be staying with, the address of my home. They call and ask my uncle if I'm going to be staying at that home. They ask for my return ticket. You know, they make sure that like you're giving them 100% proof of the answers that you are giving them. So, I mean, maybe
Serene, they asked me the same questions,
yeah.
but
I mean, I'm not saying it's only directed towards me, but I'm saying like if you're flying into Ben Gurion, you're going to be answered those questions. And if you don't have 100% backing of your questions,
Serene, don't you think my advice was good about taking an LL flight? Because then LL might ask her in New York before she.
I
Because
mean, I've traveled with American and United, and I'm stopped at JFK too and questions. I mean, I don't think it's essentially just Al Al that questions before flying into Israel or Ben Gurion, but I mean,
but I think LL is the one. I think LL is the only one that puts like stickers on your passport that
no, I've
maybe.
had stickers put on my passport with American too. But I think you just have to know your answers to the questions 100%. Know exactly where you're
I still think that still if LL questions you, that's just my take on it. That's you've never flown with LL, Serene. I just honestly
I
that
personally won't fly with it like
okay,
regardless.
well that's fine. But all I'm saying is I just personally feel like if
Mhm.
LL questions you and you pass the LL because American is not the Israelis, right? I feel like if LL questions you and you pass the LL, I feel, and I could be 100% wrong about this, I feel like Dave, I think things are going to be okay at Ben Gurion.
I mean, now with the whole processing of the visa before flying into the airport, I think it makes it better, knowing or not traveling all the way there and then being denied. But
But Serene, I have a question on that form that you fill out. Do they
mhm,
really ask you who you're going to see in Israel and everything?
yes.
Yes, I was told those exact answers as well.
So they ask you where you're. Oh my goodness, like that's like a whole. Oh my goodness, asking answering all those questions.
I don't accept Israel, but I accept that there is an occupation, and if you don't accept that Israel exists, then who is it that's occupying us? That's where I come from.
I agree with that.
I mean, Hannah, are you Palestinian?
No, I'm Afghan. I previously mentioned.
Okay. Well, I just want to say something that, like, I mean, Hannah, you said you're not on either side, but now you're like,
No, Andrea, I told you I take into account both things. My job is to kind of take from both sides, as I previously
yeah,
mentioned to you.
I can tell.
Um,
Okay, but
yeah.
anyways, the
So,
point is,
as a Muslim, I do tend to, I'm not saying I skew a little more in one way, but I do tend to have a little more favoritism, or not favoritism, but I do tend to see the sides of the Palestinians a little bit more as someone who's seen Afghanistan, Syria, all these places. and I have seen what some kind of occupation is like for us, the Taliban, and the U.S. being there for 21 plus years. I can.
But Hannah, I want to say something about the occupation, right? Okay, listen, I know occupation sucks. I'm not denying that it does. But at the same time, the occupation wouldn't be going on if there wasn't a security risk, right? If the Palestinians would have accepted a
Wouldn't be
long
a
time
security
ago.
risk.
Andrea.
Please finish. Can I please finish? If the Palestinians would have accepted a long time ago, living in part of the land, and wouldn't have had this rivers to the sea mentality and wanted all the land, then the whole first of all, the last 76 years wouldn't have happened. And second of all, or if they had agreed within the last 30 years, the last 30 years wouldn't have happened. But all I'm saying to you is the occupation is what I call a necessary, unfortunate necessary evil. Because you have a security situation in the West Bank that requires checkpoints and walls, which, by the way, most of it isn't wall, most of it is fence. Between Gaza and Israel and West Bank and Israel, you'll see that if you go to Israel. So the point is, and that fence is easy to get through. That's how come they got there on October 7th. So the point I'm trying to make is that, and I'm pro them making it all wall, by the way, for security reasons. But the point is that, like, the occupation it's necessary because the T attacks. I mean, I don't know if you keep up with this, but people are being unalived from the West Bank and Israel and the West Bank. Sometimes every day, sometimes every other day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week.
Andre, may I speak? I want to just touch on one point that you did mention where you said that there does need to be some form of occupation. As someone who has lived in the U.S. and New York, and I've seen post 9/11, the U.S. said the same thing going into Afghanistan. There needs to be some.
Hannah, can I tell you something? Let me tell you my thoughts on Afghanistan, right? I think the U.S. accomplished nothing in Afghanistan, but the only reason why is because the Taliban, you unalive 100 of them, 1,000 more of them come.
Andrea,
No.
What was the process?
I'm not done. The Taliban is like the Houthis, is like H group, unfortunately. It's very hard to defeat them. It's very hard. Listen, if America could have defeated the Taliban, I would have been all for what happened in Afghanistan because the Taliban they're just terrible. But the problem is the Taliban, you're probably never going to get rid of them. Just like you're probably never going to get rid of the Houthis, and you might never even get rid of H group in Israel. I mean in Gaza, which is the sad reality that these groups, they're like almost literally impossible to get rid of, and that's a problem. And I think the situation with America, and I want to say we lost a lot of American soldiers. I lived through that war. I was alive then. A lot of these people here are not old enough to remember that war. So what I'm trying to say is it was really bad. I remember the Taliban used to parade around unalived American, show them to us. It was so hard for us as Americans. That's why we're not into war anymore because it was so horrific for us. But putting that aside, we just weren't able to defeat. If we had, it would have been 100% worth it. But and look what the Taliban has done to Afghanistan. I mean, as someone who lived with an abusive husband for many years and lived in a very patriarchal community, which is not even like Afghanistan, but has that kind of dominance factor to it.
Andre,
I feel very sorry for the women who live under that kind of. I just honestly, it's really tragic, and it's very sad. And I'm sorry that my country could not get rid of the Taliban. I'm really sorry, and I'm really sorry that we just can't get rid of these T groups.
Look, Andrea, can I just start? Let me kind of elaborate on that. You tended to, I think you kind of skewed where I was going a little bit with this. The U.S. invaded Afghanistan in 2001 as a response to 9/11. I was someone who was kind of seeing the thing. The Taliban was a little bit before. That was within the civil war that was a little bit before. But in 2001, the U.S. came with a primary focus of kind of killing Osama bin Laden, which wasn't even in Afghanistan.
But the Taliban, they were also fighting the
Yes,
Taliban,
yes.
dude.
And then afterwards, they started fighting the Taliban. But
They started fighting the Taliban the whole time. I don't think you know the history of the war. The Taliban was the one that hosted Osama. So I think you're an Afghani, like recalling the history wrong. The Taliban was the one that hosted Osama, and the Taliban was there the whole time. The Taliban, speaking of somebody who has Pakistani kids, the Taliban has done so much to Pakistan, which I know many Pakistanis support the Taliban. I know that. I get that.
they are.
That being said, that being said, like the Taliban and like the whole region is on fire because of the Taliban. The whole South Asian, like besides India, I'm just saying, like it's the whole Taliban thing is very upsetting to me because I've known people who support it and I've known that mentality. And honestly, like this whole thing, like some people believe, like, well, the Taliban, they keep law and order, they keep people from stealing and robbing, so they're like a good thing. Oh, let's forget the fact that they, blow themselves up and unalive people and whatever, and treat women badly. Like, I've heard that mentality, but the point is that, like, I think honestly, I'm sorry about what happened in Afghanistan on both sides. What happened to the Americans, what happened to the Afghanis. But if the Taliban had been defeated, it would have all been worth it. Like, if we could have gotten rid of them, but the thing is, we didn't. We didn't. And and like I said, it's almost impossible. And the thing about it is we kept going and going and going and going and going, beating our heads against the wall like we were going to get rid of them. And the thing is, we couldn't get rid of them. And it's very, and seeing what's happened now because they continue to be around is very sad to me. And I don't even want to continue to discuss it because for me, it's very traumatizing as an American. I know it's traumatizing for you as an Afghan, but for me, it's very traumatizing as an American who lived through that war. So I just want to say that, like, honestly, like these groups that we can't get rid of, Houthis, who has ruined Yemen. I was married to a Yemeni. Houthis has totally destroyed Yemen. Totally destroyed Yemen. It's a travesty. They continue to destroy Yemen, and there's nothing anybody seems to be able to do about the Houthis. Like, you can't get rid of them. It's just these groups that you can't get rid of. They're just a cancer to the world. It's like frustrating. It's like, what do? You can't get rid of them. You don't want to move them to places because you don't want to hurt the civilians. But, like, what is the solution here? Like, these groups just being around forever and just torturing their people and torturing everybody else and causing havoc around the entire, like, it's really a problem. And I don't know the solution. I don't know what the good answers are.
No, I 100% agree with you. All very traumatic things, but I have had the honor of kind of going to Afghanistan, as I do have an Afghan passport as well through my parents. But I have gone there, and I've noticed that right now under Taliban occupation, surprisingly, it is a lot more peaceful than when the U.S. was there and when the U.S. was occupying.
Well, with all respect, if you're trying to promote the Taliban.
No. Let me finish. You're not letting me finish. Andre, you're not letting me finish. That's kind of like the little problem that we're running into. But I've been there, and a lot of those that I've spoken to have said that the U.S. kind of used that whole occupation notion, and they kind of used this. This is not the Taliban speaking. I've spoken to women who are not pro-Taliban that are I have not spoken to the Taliban. I've spoken to my actual communities. And they have said,
this live is not about Afghanistan. I don't want to get on the whole.
Let me finish.
I don't want to talk about this. Let's get back on Israel Palestine. This live is not about Afghanistan. But honestly, I don't want any pro-Taliban talk here. I get it. Right now, Afghanistan is not in a war. So of course it's going to be more peaceful. It's not in a war. But the bottom line is the Taliban are dirtbags, and nobody should say anything there's nothing good about them. So let's move on back to Israel Palestine.
I agree with that, but the whole preface was in terms of so let me finish now. Where I'm going back.
I want to talk. I'm going to remove you. I'll let the next person run. I don't want to talk about Afghanistan anymore.
So okay. So we're talking about occupation. So we're going to talk about now.
I don't even think you've witnessed the occupation in Israel. So I really don't want you to speak on something you've only watched documentaries about.
Andrea, I've literally I've had reports come back directly from both Gaza.
Comparing the U.S. military occupation to it's like honestly, like just
I'm no longer comparing, Andrea. We're
Hannah, you're judging your opinion of occupation based on what you saw in Afghanistan because you're traumatized from Afghanistan. The situation
I've been to Congo. I've seen the world.
Hannah, excuse me, I'm talking. The situation in the West Bank is not the same situation as Afghanistan, right? It's apples and oranges. It's on a fucking different continent, for God's sakes. Like, it's a totally different set of people. Like, honestly, you're comparing, like you can't compare something that's miles away from each other, totally different set of people, totally different army, totally different groups of people involved, Taliban in America versus the Palestinians and the IDF. And you're like, oh my God, I know about occupation because I went to Afghanistan or I went to whatever other country you went to. Like, with all due respect, like, this is why people get annoyed with the UNRWA people because it's like, wow.
Look, Andrea, I think we're kind of on two different wavelengths here, and this is something I'd previously mentioned way back before. It's not just Afghanistan. I have myself seen.
I know because you've been to so many different, and I'm sure that every single occupation is different, right? And I don't even know if they were all called occupations, right? So with all due respect, you're putting your own language on stuff that might not even been called an occupation, but you're classifying it as an occupation. And then
under government files, it's an occupation
because it's an occupation, and you're not even saying the reasoning behind, well, why are these checkpoints here? Oh, maybe because people have been unaliving people, and maybe because people.
I think it goes both ways.
And slaughtering their wives, husbands, and babies. But you know what? Who cares about that? Because we're worried about checkpoints. Maybe it's people have been pew-pewing people in the streets, but we're not worried about that. We're worried about checkpoints. So with all due respect, before you start judging an occupation, why don't you go talk to the people who live in the West Bank, who are Jewish, who are being unalived all the time, and tell them.
I've seen the protests outside.
Tell them to take away the checkpoints and then be more in danger. You try living in the West Bank, take away the checkpoints.
You try living in Gaza. You try experiencing.
With all due respect, I'm talking about the West Bank right now. And if you take away those checkpoints, people's lives are going to be in danger. And I'm not willing to endanger people's lives by taking away those checkpoints.
And if you keep bombing the Gazans, then what do we have?
I'm not harming anybody. Now you're personalizing it.
You're the one saying you're in danger. You're in Brooklyn, New York, babe.
The reason I've been to Israel, though, and actually I'm Jewish, and actually I have many friends in Israel, and a lot of my neighborhood is Israeli, so I'm deeply connected to this.
I live too in Chelsea, New York. I've seen Israelis myself.
You're Afghan. You're not even Palestinian.
Okay, but I live in New York with you.
Let me add something. Gaza wouldn't be pew-pewed and boom-boomed right now if H Group hadn't attacked on October 7th and unalive 1,200 Israelis, and if there weren't hostages in Gaza right now, which there would be a ceasefire right now if H Group would agree to release the hostages. But because they're holding on to the hostages, there isn't a continued ceasefire.
I don't believe Netanyahu released all the hostages as well.
Bye-bye.